There we go. Needed juice. Good afternoon. My name is Kim Swire, and I'm going to get up here because we're live streaming this. As you may know, this is a program that is being sponsored by Shenendehowa Neighbors Connecting. We are a village that was formed about 5 years ago here in town. We're a not-for-profit membership organization of those 55 and over who live in the Shenendehowa School District. And our purpose is really to help people stay connected with one another, to enable them to live safely and securely in their own homes. We strive to have at least one program every month, and this is one that we had 3 years ago, February 14th, 2020. Do you remember what life was like then? We had no idea what was coming, but we had a really enjoyable time, and we wanted to repeat it. So today, we are able to enjoy storytellers. I'll give you the names in a second. Joe Doolittle, Margaret French, and Janine Laverty, who are going to be speaking to us. And then we'll have a brief intermission. We have some nice refreshments in the back for you. And after a 15-minute intermission, we'll have Dan Berggren, who's a fabulous folk singer, and he'll be entertaining us for the remainder of our program. Just so you know, a little bit about Shen Neighbors, we are also very closely affiliated with CareLinks. You might be familiar with CareLinks. It's a program that serves older adults in town. Well, not just Clifton Park, but all of the surrounding area. There's information about CareLinks in the back. We try to encourage our members to become CareLinks volunteers. And if you have any questions about Shen Neighbors or CareLinks, we can answer those for you today. So, without further ado, I think I'll go ahead and introduce Joe Doolittle, who will be our first storyteller of the day. Thank you.
Doolittle, and I'm pleased to be here with you in this beautiful place with some evocative memories for Gay and I, because the pastor that built this place was a mentor to our son Ben, who's an ordained minister, and some of that stuff happened here. So, this is a love story that's a first-person love story. It involves my wife and me and a cowboy hat. Our moms were both active in the Methodist Women's Society, and they had a retreat the first week of July every year. And so they didn't have to worry about their youngest kids. They sent us to Sky Farm Camp up near Chestertown. So when I was 11, I went to camp. And when Gay was 10, she went to camp. And she was in the girls' cabin, and I was in the boys' cabin, and there was all the but I was off my game. I had forgotten to bring my cowboy hat. And it was my oldest brother's cowboy hat. He used it in the Boy Scouts, and I just wasn't right without it. So before Sunday dinner on the first night of camp, I begged to use the phone. I called my mom, and I said, send me my cowboy hat. And don't screw up the Wyoming curl in the brim. So what happens? Thursday at mail call right before lunch. My cowboy hat's here, along with some changes of underwear that she had carefully put in there to keep the roll on. And I put it on, and I paraded around, and I may have been a little pompous. But this little girl that was in the girls' cabin, she came over and she stole my cowboy hat. I didn't even know she liked me. You know, and then to add insult to injury, she ran faster than I could, and I couldn't catch her. So I had to kind of beg at the dining table to get my hat back. But by that time, I was in love. I was just smitten. And every summer for the next 3 years, I went to camp, Gay went to camp, and we became, well, I wouldn't say an item but we were fond of each other. Now, when I was 14, I was in a bad car accident, and I ate a windshield, and I broke my hip, and I wasn't going to camp. That summer, I didn't go to camp. I got little buzzes in my ears, but I didn't know enough to identify that they might be gay trying to track me down. But the next spring, I was getting a little better, and I got a letter. I got home from school, and there was a letter addressed to Alden Thompson Doolittle. That's my real name. Alden Thompson Doolittle III. And she said that because she knew my father's name was Alden, and she didn't want him opening the letter. So, well, I get this letter, and it has an important element in it. It has her address and her phone number. And they had just dropped the long-distance tariffs between Schenectady and Albany. Yes, there were long-distance tariffs between Schenectady and Albany. So I could call her up. And we figured out on the phone that I could take a bus from Colony High School, where I went to school, to the city line of Albany and walk 6 blocks, and I was at her house. So the big day came. No parents home. We were very good. We were very good. But we connected. And she walked me down to Central Avenue to get the bus. But I said, no, I'm going to hitchhike. I'm going to hitchhike. So I go out there and I throw on my thumb. We hitchhiked a lot in those days. Throw on my thumb. And this car stops. And I don't recognize the car, but there's 3 men in it. So I get up and I get in the back seat of the car and I hear hello. And I'm looking at my dad. He carpooled to work at the telephone company from Schenectady to Albany. And they'd seen me sticking out my thumb. And then I'm looking at him, and I said to him, you do this a lot to a parent. I bet you're wondering what I'm doing. So I told him, and the cat was out of the bag. And once we started that back and forth, things just went back and forth. We went steady our senior years in high school. We maintained a romantic relationship halfway through our freshman year at college, because she was at Cornell and I wasn't, so there you go. And I bumped into her brother in a bar in Albany just before I was going back for my senior year, and we kind of stayed on light touch. And he says, you want to stop over? So I did. And I was singing in a group, and we were going to be at Cornell for a big deal fall tonic. And I said, I'm going to be down on campus, and I'm a big deal. I'm singing in the Colgate 13. So I called her up to make the date. And she was going all out of town with somebody else to go to a funeral. I was brokenhearted again. So I figured, she said her sister, or her roommate, was dating a guy in one of the Cornell groups. I said, I got to get a date. I got to look good. So I managed that. It showed up with a really good-looking girl from Cortland who got wildly drunk, and I had to carry out of the party. So I got my stomach girded, and I called her up. And she mentions on the phone that she didn't have a ride home for Thanksgiving. And I said to her, well, I could come down and pick you up. It only adds 4 hours to my drive, but I'll come down and pick you up. And we began to talk. And we talked for a couple of months, and we both got into graduate school, and there was the Vietnam War. And I told her I didn't want to lose her again. We had a long talk. She didn't go to graduate school. She was going to go next. I went to graduate school. We both went to Pittsburgh. We've been married 57 years. It's been a real rush. And I stand in awe of her love and devotion to me and the boys. And it all started because she stole my cowboy hat.
I gave it back.
Oh, yeah, right. This next story is grown right out of the Adirondacks, and it's one of our favorite places. And it goes back to the late 1800s and a man named Henry von Hovenberg. Henry was a native of Lansingburg. You know, for those people who know Troy, you come from the burg. And he didn't have a college education, but he was really smart. And he figured out how to have a telegraph and a printer get connected so that the messages came out as messages. He held the patent, and he became a millionaire at the age of 22 in about 1873 or something like that. And he got into the gentrification routine, and he got invited to the Ausable camp, Ausable Lake. And when he got up there, he was a little bit out of his element. He had the money, but he didn't have the pedigree. So people kind of gave him a shun, except for this really pretty girl from Brooklyn. And they went hiking together in groups and whatever, and they got close to each other. And Henry and Josephine fell in love. And he proposed on the top of Mount Marcy. And it was wonderful, except for the parents of Josephine. They didn't really like this guy. But they were set together, and they had seen this little lake way off in the distance from the top of Marcy. So they hiked into that lake, and they explored it, and they decided they were going to make that their home. And the honeymoon never happened because they whisked Josephine home to Brooklyn. And Henry began to develop the property. He actually bought a square mile of the Adirondacks. He referred to it as his finest square mile. And he began to develop the place. He had to build a road 10 miles from the main dirt road to get to the property. And he built a beautiful lodge that they talked about in their letters. And then he got a letter, and Josephine had died of tuberculosis. So there not only was there a family hindrance, there was reality. So Henry named the mountain that's next to Hart Lake Mount Joe. And it's Mount Joe to this day. And 2 years later, he finished the property and he opened up the Adirondack Lodge. And he spelled it L-O-J because he didn't want anybody to confuse it with anything else like it in the Adirondacks. And he was a gallant host. He knew how to cook, he knew how to hike, he knew how to guide, he knew how to hunt. He enthralled people with his tall tales. People loved him and they loved the property. And nothing will last forever. There's a major fire. He got the silverware in the lake, he got the horses out of the barn, but he lost the property. So Henry rebuilt. Got in a little financial problems out of that. The Lake Placid Club took it over for him, let him be the manager. Once he got it up on his feet, he went back in the electronic business at Lake Placid. He dressed in buckskin and sassy things, and he was a character. But he never remarried. He never found a love like Josephine. And he often spent time just sitting on the top of that little mountain. He passed away. 12 years later, they're developing Lake Placid as the Olympic site. And people remembered Henry. And you'll remember Henry. Because the people of Lake Placid named Mount Van Hovenberg after Henry. And they put in the bobsled and later the luge and later the whole thing. And so the romance and the love of Henry and Josephine lives on because you can walk around it like Hart Lake, and you can climb and take in the vistas of the high peak from the top of Mount Joe. And if that isn't a loving, loving story, I don't know what is. Thank you. Our next teller is a lovely, dear friend of mine, Margaret French, who I jokingly say is Canadian, because we don't hold that against her, but she is a Canadian. And she's brought a lot of that culture and stories into our group of storytellers. She's a creative writer. She's a creative writer teacher. She taught at Union for years, where she retired and did full-time things with storytelling. And she's one of the co-producers of our program up at Cafe Lena. Margaret French.
Oh, hello all. It's so nice to be here. Now, some years ago, I got the notion that I would drive to my mother's house. Now, the only complication was that my mother lived 3,000 miles away. I felt I needed it. I'd gone through a rough time. I needed that long drive. I needed the solitude. I needed the quiet. Everybody else in this world thought it was a ridiculous and a terrible idea, especially my friends. And they tried to dissuade me. You know, they said, "Margaret, what will you do if your car breaks down? And Margaret, suppose you get attacked by an axe murderer or stomped on by a moose." But I was prepared to ignore them all. And I got my car ready, and I had a little red Dodge Colt, bottom of the line, no air conditioning, no radio. But that was okay. And I packed it up, a suitcase, a comforter and a pillow. I don't know why I thought they were necessary. A cooler with peanut butter and cracked wheat bread and some cold drinks. And I was ready to go. And if you know the Adirondacks, you know the way. Long Lake, Blue Mountain Lake, Tupper Lake, and sorry, I left out Long Lake, Blue Mountain Lake, Long Lake, what am I? Indian Lake, yes. And I planned to spend extra time. What I thought I would do is go to Ottawa, visit my brother, and then hang a left. And I wanted to spend extra time in the Adirondacks, because there's something about the trees and rocks and hills and lakes of the Adirondacks that makes me feel better about the world. Now, I think we all react to geography, and I'd lived in different places as a kid. Now, the prairies were hard. I often felt like an ant in a huge, unsympathetic universe. And as for the Rocky Mountains, you know, my mother lived pretty close to the mountains. Well, they were too big and too rugged to be comfortable. But the Adirondacks, as Goldilocks would say, were just right. So I took my time and I meandered up towards my brother's house, and I got as far as Canton, a few miles from the border, and I thought I'd better fill up with gas. You know how expensive gas is up in Canada. And I stopped at one of those gasoline/food market places and reached for my purse, and it wasn't there. Now, without my purse, it meant I didn't have my driver's license, I didn't have my credit cards, I didn't have a passport, I didn't have any money. I probably had enough gas to get home, but it would be close. All my friends were right. I wasn't fit to go to Alberta. I mean, who was I to think that I could drive that far? I couldn't even make it to the Canadian border. So I luckily had 600 pennies in the car. I don't remember why. And at this gas station / convenience store, I went and I talked to the young woman who worked there. And I asked her if I could pay for gas with 600 pennies. And she kind of looked at me, and she said, "Well, okay." And I had enough gas to get home, but I was feeling kind of glum. And I resolved to stop at every place I'd stopped at on the way and see if I could find my purse. And, you know, I was meandering. I stopped at lots of places. Now in Long Lake, I'd use the restrooms that are by the beach, and I went, checked every square inch of those restrooms, and I went up and down the driveway. It was not there. And a little further down, I stopped at the general store, and the store was empty, just me and the proprietor. He kind of reminded me of Moses, a big guy, full beard. And he helped me check every display with guidebooks or maple syrup or scented candles. It was not in the stores. So he said, "Let us pray. Dear Lord, please help this woman find her purse. Amen." And there was nothing more to do but to go on. Now, by the time I got to Indian Lake, it was raining, it was night, it was dark, there was thunder and lightning, and I was tired. And I thought, I cannot drive any further. Needless to say, I had no money with me. But there was a pull-off just across from the lake, and I went there and decided I'd spend the night. I mean, I felt pretty safe. Nobody, not even axe murderers, would come out in the weather we were having. And I realized I had brought that comforter and that pillow for a reason. I just hadn't known the reason at the time. So I took it to the back seat, and I had an audio cassette player. You remember those things, right? And I had a book on tape, Blue Highways by William Least Heat Moon, and he was talking about the kind of highways I'd been driving on all day. So I put the cassette into this cassette player. It had only one volume, too loud, but at least it worked. And I fell asleep. And the next morning, I drove back home. And I went inside, checked my phone messages. A woman from Oneida had found my purse. The trip was on. I could, instead of going north to Ottawa and then going west, I could go to Oneida all the way, turn left near the Thousand Islands, and then hang a left. Well, there was also, like, in Manitoba, you have to veer right a bit. But otherwise, it's a pretty easy drive. And so I said, well, don't mail it to me. I'll come pick it up. So I met her and her boyfriend in an Oneida Friendlies. And they wouldn't take any reward. They wouldn't even let me pay for their breakfast. And they said, check your purse. Check to make sure that everything is in it. And I knew everything was in it. I mean, I just knew it. And the rest of the trip was fine. I had all the solitude and all the quiet that I needed. And these days, when I look back on it, I barely remember the part about losing the purse. But I do remember the hills and the rocks and the trees and the lakes of the Adirondacks, which gave me comfort. And I remember the kindness of those strangers I met along the way. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce a dear friend, Janine Laverty. Janine is the woman who taught every storyteller in the Capital District how to tell stories. And for that, I am forever grateful. These days, she and I are, and Christy Keegan, are co-producers of the Saratoga open mic at Cafe Lena. So you will enjoy her stories.
And
Thank you.
there's a flyer about them at the front table.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. Thank you.
that my breath?
You brought a percussion section.
What should I do about that? Don't speak.
Yeah, move your mic away a little bit.
Oh, I see.
There, not too much, but you're good.
How's that? Yeah, that seems better. Okay. Hello, all of you out there. I'm glad to see you. I'm telling today a story that was written by the mother of a woman, a lot of whose stories I tell, Jean Robert Foster, who was born in the Adirondacks in 1879. So her mother, Lucia Newell Olivier, was a pretty feisty woman. The only thing I'll tell you about her is that she was arrested for voting on the socialist ticket long before women had the right to vote. This is one of her stories. And it's called The Line Fence. And a line fence, in case you didn't grow up in the country in Iowa like I did, or in the Adirondacks, a line fence is the fence that marks the boundary between your property and somebody else's. And at the time that this story was written, that fence would have been made not out of wire, but out of rails. Oh, good, someone's just coming in. Welcome. Celia Wilson had been angling for Ike Warner nigh on to 10 years. The gossip said, she never will land him. But here was the wedding day, and we were not invited, all on account of a line fence. You see, Ike Warner allowed that the line fence was a foot over onto his land, and so one night, is that me? That thumping? Yeah. No, okay, thank you. My ears are bad, so when we combine my ears with the... Ike Warner vowed that the fence was a foot over onto his property. And so, one night, Ike and his hired man, Joe Harp, they moved it a foot onto ours. Now, my father waited until Ike Warner had gone to camp meeting, and then he moved it back. Now, Ike Warner set a store by camp meeting. Every fall, he would go and get sanctified. My father said that horse sense and honesty were good enough for him. But when Ike Warner came home from camp meeting and saw what had happened, while he had been praying to the Lord to protect his and his'n, he turned dark in the face. Joe Harp began cussing a blue streak, that hired man. Now, Joe Harp had no call to be pious because he didn't own any land and didn't have any expectation of ever owning any land. So he swore up and down every word he had learned loggin' and canalin', and some others too. my father sat over on Hog's back and laughed to hear Joe Harp cussing over other people's calamities. But now Ike Warner was about to be married, and we were not invited. My father took his hoe and went to the back lot. My mother said that she expected that he didn't want to see the wedding couple go by because Celia would be married in church. I knew my mother was grieved as well because weddings and funerals were things that were a real treat for Adirondack country people who had very few real pleasures. And my mother was a master hand at weddings and funerals. She could bake a 3-story wedding cake or lay out a corpse better than any other woman in Warren County. We sat down to sew carpet rags. I knew my mother was thinking about everything she was missing. She was thinking about all the women's talk about births and deaths, and about the season's pickling, and the sly jokes about the bride and groom, and the bride's presents. Finally, she spoke. "I wonder if it's a love match," she said. "I don't see how it possibly could be, because Celia's been around him for 10 years. How could she still be loving him? It must just be toleration and her own desire to have a house of her own and children to fuss over." But at that point, our conversation was interrupted by a clanking of chains, and we saw Billy, father's prize Cotswold ram. He had broken his tether, and just as he came running in one direction, we saw Ike Warner's, the heads of his bay colts coming around the bend of the road by the log cabin that my grandfather made. At the sight of Billy primed for war, Ike Warner's bay colts reared up, and they went sliding off the road. My father was there before Ike Warner could even untangle himself from the reins. He had been sitting in the log barn all the time so he could see Ike and Celia go by. Ike wasn't hurt, but Celia had fainted dead away from fright. And so while Ike Warner was riding the horses and everything, my father scooped up Celia and carried her up to our house, took her into the best room, and put her down on the couch. And then, while my mother was fussing over Celia, giving her peppermint tea and such like, my father took Ike Warner into the kitchen for a little cider. Now, there is something about hard cider that mellows the heart and wipes away old grudges. My father spoke first. "Shake, Ike," he said. "Let's split the cost of the rail fence and we'll build it together." Ike Warner took another drink of cider. We're two darn fools. We don't need any line fence to tell us where the border is between yours and mine. You just mow the grass as far as you think is yourn, and I'll take the rest. When Celia came round, and my mother and she came into the kitchen, Ike Warner put his arm around Celia's waist, and then he said to all of us, "Now you folks, you put on your jockeys and you come on down to the wedding supper with us." My mother gave Celia a pair of blue and white striped flannel blankets that my grandmother had woven. Oh, my mother set a store by those. And my father, who was pretty tight-fisted, pressed a $10 gold piece into Celia's hand. When we got to the dinner, we were all sitting down, and then somebody missed Joe Harp. Pretty soon, he came in. He looked all tousled and hot. He was mad. Still, "I have been after that ram," he said, "and I finally got the better of him. He's tethered out there to an oak tree." My father said, "You know, when I bought that ram, I paid $50 clean cash. I wouldn't get or take 1,000 for him today." And so that is how there's now a big healthy row of blackberry bushes where that line fence once was. You know, don't you, how blackberry briars love to follow fire tracks? So now the only contention left is whose wife makes the best pies and blackberry jam. There's not a lazy hair on Celia's head. And she and Ike, they get along scrumptious. My mother says, must have been a love match after all.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Joe, and everyone. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed those stories. We really did. Thank you. So we do have some nice refreshments in the back, some water and some goodies, so please help yourself. We'll take a little 15-minute.
And there are some flyers about upcoming storytelling events that I know you're going to want to take home.
Right, flyers in the back for the storytellers events, and as well as information about Shen neighbors and carelings. So please help yourself to refreshments. If you need a restroom, there's one way down the end of the hall, on the main hallway. And we'll be back, I'll be calling you back in 15 to hear Dan Berggren. Okay? Enjoy, thanks.
architects were fighting this. Yeah. Yes. So that it was done in 1967 and ended here, right here. So that goes down to the back of the park. Everything from there are efficient. No, no, actually we're in the process. We're getting pipe work. Pipe work.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? In the interest of time, I'm going to ask that everybody start making their way back to their seats, please, so we can listen to Dan. I hope you enjoyed the refreshments. I don't think I mentioned the cookies were handmade by one of our members, and I hope you enjoyed one of those because they were really good. She's actually very interested in cookie decorating. She's going to take a course at Hudson Valley when she gets back from her vacation. She couldn't be here today because she's off cruising in the Antarctic. So, yeah, really nice trip around the base of South America. So, anyway, what do you think so far? Really good, right? And could we have a better day weather-wise? You know, when you plan something like this at this time of the year, you're never sure. Could there be a snowstorm? What's going to happen if that happens? But we were so lucky. And maybe, so I don't lose track of it, I'll take this moment to thank everyone here at Christ Community Reformed Church. This is a venue that is very special in lots of ways, and appreciate John Graham in the back doing our sound. Thank you, John. And as I said, this is being live streamed on YouTube for those who couldn't be here today, so we appreciate that. It's also going to be recorded and put up on our website very soon. So, Dan's in the back. Come on up, Dan. We're going to be hearing from Dan Bergeron now with folk songs of love songs of the Adirondacks, right?
Skinnamarink-a-dink-a-dink, skinnamarink-a-doo. I love you. How are you? Haven't seen you in 3 years. That was my last concert before the pandemic, was right here. And we've all got stories to tell. I was a sophomore in college when I met this girl, and she told me she was going to spend her junior year in France. And then junior year happened, and I ran into her in the dining hall senior year, and I said, I really impressed her. I said, "Oh, hi, how was Spain?" We became friends. I was acting in a play, and she was working on costumes, and we crossed paths many times. And then for my Christmas present, December 1970, she gave me a sweater she made. And you know what? I can still wear it. Still fit into it. Somebody made this old sweater from 6 or 7 big green balls of yarn. Look how it surrounds me, how it wraps around me, just like being hugged by loving arms. I don't know the name of the farmer. I don't suppose that I ever will. No, I never met him, but I can't forget him. He's the one who raised the sheep and sheared the wool. You know I love my old green sweater.
I've worn it for years and it feels good as new. There's just one thing that warms me better. That's your love. That's you. Somebody made this old sweater. You can tell that it wasn't by machine, 'cause every stitch of every row was knitted nice and slow from some wool that was dyed so dark and green. Who took time to clean the fleece and then to card it? I don't suppose that I'll ever know. And who did all the spinning? That was only the beginning, before love was knitted into every row. Try the chorus with me. You know I love my old green sweater. I've worn it for years and it feels good as new. There's just one thing that warms me better. That's your love. That's you. Some folks have drawers just jammed with sweaters, while other folks have none to keep them warm. Well, I have one that's got your touch, and that's why it means so much. And I'll wear it when it's mended or it's torn. Somebody made this old sweater from 6 or 7 big green balls of yarn. Look how it surrounds me, how it wraps around me, just like being hugged by loving arms. Let me hear you. You know I love my old green sweater. I've worn it for years and it feels good as new. There's just one thing that warms me better. That's your love. That's you. That's the love that made the sweater. That's you. Thank you. The only time I tried to knit, my mother showed me the basics, but I remember as a kid knitting this, maybe it was a scarf for a cat or a dog or something. It was about this wide and 3 feet long, and I just kept knitting and not knowing what to do next. Yeah, my mother was the quintessential farm girl who learned to be self-sufficient, do anything that needed to be done, she could do it. And once I tried one of her loves, her passions, was picking wild berries. And starting off with the strawberries at the end of June, beginning of July. You know, I'm talking wild strawberries that like the size of a pea, like the tip of your finger. And she'd be bending over, and one of the pots that she didn't use for cooking anymore, that was one of the berry pails. And I wanted to write a song for her about berry picking, and I got a few words down and set it aside. This is back when I was still teaching, so I didn't write too many songs per year. Then I got an idea for, well, she makes the most incredible pie. Maybe I could write a song about pie and all the different, you know, fillings, starting with apple. I mean, she battled the bear and the deer that would come and eat apples from the orchard that was 100 years old when I was a kid. That her grandfather had planted those apple trees. And she would take those apples that had bad spots in them, or spots where a chipmunk or squirrel had eaten, and she would salvage the rest of it, and we would have a cupboard full of applesauce and pies. So instead of writing just about one thing like berries or apples, I decided to go around the seasons. See her kneeling at the top of the field, bandana covering her head, picking strawberries the size of a pea, fingertips all stained red, giving thanks for each berry that goes in her pan, thanks for the sunshine, the shortcake and jam. It's moments like this that make her smile, stop what she's doing and pause for a while. It's moments like this when she gives praise for life on earth. That's your part. Life on earth. The sun's beating down, she's dripping with sweat. The back of her neck is red. One taste of tomato tells her it's worth it as she puts the tools back in the shed. She knows a good garden needs weeding for hours, and she loves being surrounded by songbirds and flowers. It's moments like this that make her smile, stop what she's doing and pause for a while. It's moments like this when she gives praise for life on earth. Breathing the apple air, straightening her back, she's been sorting the good from the bad. The deer and the bear have eaten their share, for the windfall that's left she's glad. Glad that some of the orchard is still alive, glad for the applesauce, cider, and pies. It's moments like this that make her smile, stop what she's doing and pause for a while. It's moments like this when she gives praise for life on earth. Life on earth. The wood stove takes the chill from the kitchen. Balsam is adding its scent. She's stuffing the pillows with needles she's cut, each one to be mailed as a present. She stitches them closed and stops now and then to think about each of her long-distance friends. It's moments like this that make her smile, stop what she's doing and pause for a while. It's moments like this when she gives praise for life on earth. Life on earth. In the dark of night or the broad light of day, any time's good for a prayer. A moment of silence to take it all in, a moment to be aware of all living things under the sun. On this living planet we all are one. It's moments like this that make me smile, stop what I'm doing and pause for a while. It's moments like this when I give praise for life on earth. Life on earth. Last summer when my granddaughters came to visit, the eldest turns 14 today. Happy birthday. I was telling them how when their mom was a kid, in the kitchen we made balsam pillows, and how when I was a kid my mother taught me how to make balsam pillows, and how when my mom was a kid, who they'd never met, their great-grandma, when she was a little girl, her mother taught her how to make balsam pillows. And it was quite the business. All the excess branches, nothing went to waste. So if you sold Christmas trees, all those extra branches that didn't get shipped away, you'd snip, 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 and fill bags, and they went to bring comfort and a good scent of the Adirondacks to friends. Well, that song mentioned pies. I guess it's no secret that pie is my favorite dessert. And I don't have a favorite pie. There's just too many good ones. Mince, apple, I guess rhubarb is my favorite. So if any of you are thinking of making a pie,
Nice try, Dad.
one Christmas time, my wife Nancy was in the next room baking away and baking some pies. And I thought, well, I'm not as good a baker as she is, but at least I could write a song for her. So I stole a tune from the 1940s, when these two guys in Hollywood, on the hottest day of July, instead of going to the beach, you know what they did? They sat down and wrote, "Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow." Oh, the meal was so delicious, but before we do the dishes, I really don't mean to pry, but where's the pie, where's the pie, where's the pie? And the oven is on to bake some rhubarb, apple, and peach. It's a hard enough choice to make, so I'll have a piece of each. After dinner we all are quite full, but there's room for one more biteful. And if you tell me there's none, I'll cry. Where's the pie, where's the pie, where's the pie? There are brownies and carrot cake, lime jello and coffee ice cream. And even though I'm awake, there's a restaurant in my dreams where the appetizer is pie and the main course is pie. Then you cleanse your palate with pie, and for dessert there are 3 kinds of pie. There's the pie, there's the pie, there's the pie. I'd like you to picture all the kitchens you've ever known, from the last holiday to childhood and everywhere in between. Just, I don't mind if you close your eyes. If you fall asleep, I'll wake you up at the end. But I'd just like you to picture all those kitchens in your life. When you have friends or family over, it doesn't matter how big the rest of your house is, it seems everybody's elbow to elbow in the kitchen helping get things out, put things away. Sitting in your kitchen, coffee on the table, talking about the morning and singing a song. There's so much we have to do now, so we'd better get a move on, move on. Sitting in your kitchen, hands across the table, we're looking for some answers in each other's eyes. There's so much we have to find out, so we'd better get a move on. move on. Sitting in your kitchen, the cards are on the table. We're gambling for some high stakes, but nothing to lose. There's so much that we could win now, so we'd better get a move on, move on. I'm sitting in my kitchen, your letter's on the table, telling what you're up to and how you are. Well, I've got a song to sing you, so I better get a move on, move on. Try it with me. Sitting in your kitchen, sitting in your kitchen, coffee on the table, talking about the morning, and singing a song. So much we have to do, so much we have to do now, so we'd better get a move on, move on. Move on, move on. Yeah, I know, no one told you there would be banjo at this today. But, you know, I play an old-timey folk style where you try to make the banjo quieter. This is an open back banjo, and I have a cork and a piece of wool in here to try to make it quieter. And bluegrass banjos have a big resonator in the back trying to make it louder. So that's the difference between bluegrass and folk banjo. This song may be a couple of weeks premature, but at least it'll be in your head when the time is right. Snowbanks melt, geese are on the wing when spring comes, spring comes. Dandelions bloom and robins sing when the spring it does come in. The days are longer, short are the nights. It's time to remove the Christmas lights. Oh, springtime has come. Try that. Oh, springtime has come. Trade the storm window for the screen when spring comes, spring comes. Don't mow the lawn till at least it's green when the spring it does come in. You could work all day till the house is clean, or lay in a hammock with a magazine. Oh, springtime has come. You're out in the yard, no coat at all when spring comes, raking up stuff that you missed last fall when the spring it does come in. Your body aches, but the garden's dug, so pour yourself a frosty mug. Oh, springtime has come. Oh, one more thing before I go. When spring comes, when you bid farewell to the wind and snow, when the spring it goes come in, you can put your scrapers and shovels away, but wait until the end of May. Oh, springtime has come. What's that I hear? Is it your voice? When spring comes, you can sing along, that's your own choice. When the spring it does come in, when you sing along, it's much more fun. But it's too late, this song's all done. Oh, springtime has come. Thank you. I've got one more, and this is a real love song that comes from the heart. And I'd like to tell you that the end of April, on the last Sunday in April, Sunday, April 23rd, the day after Earth Day, I'm going to be doing an Earth Day concert at Cafe Lena. and also celebrating 50 years since I started performing and songwriting. I can't count the years when I was a choir boy or when I sang at home. Yeah? I was in Central Africa a number of years, 1997, doing some work for a United States Information Agency. And one Sunday evening, my colleagues and I had our feet up and we were relaxing and getting ready for the next week of work. And I saw, as the sun was going down over Mwanza Bay, I saw an old couple get into a boat. And I could tell by their every movement that they had done this many times before together. And this song just came out. It has a one-word chorus. The word is kuliana, which is Swahili for caring for each other. Kuliana, 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 try it. Kuliana, Kuliana. The sun shines bright on Mwanza Bay. The rain clouds are coming at midday. There's a boat in the water with a husband and wife. They're fishing for supper. They're fishing for life. Kuliana, 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 Kuliana. She checks the net while he bails the boat. They're humming the same song, note for note. Sometimes they decide where the boat will go. Sometimes they go with the water's flow. Kuliana, 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 Kuliana. They've had their share of joy and pain. They know that nothing grows without rain, so they don't mind the stormy weather. Their umbrella is being together. Kuliana, 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 Kuliana. These two love each other, but don't say so. They care for each other, and they both know. As they row home, the sun's going down. A rainbow greets them in Mwanza town. Kuliana, 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 Kuliana. A little bit louder. Kuliana, Kuliana,
where he was running the telecommunications system, and decided to go back to the farm in Newcomb or Olmstedville, which is not even a wide spot in the road. Bigger than Newcomb, okay. And you went from a high school of like 2,000 to a high school of 140?
Right, my class was 11.
So it's all explained now. I just, are we gonna do this?
Yeah.
You're gonna introduce this whole thing, right?
Sure.
So you gotta turn your mic on
No, yeah. I think we'll just float in front of this mic, and this mic will pick us all up. This is an experiment for not only for you, but for us. And it's a song I wrote during the pandemic, and we're going to try it a different way. It's called Imagine That, Then Make It So. Who's first?
I am. Oh, yeah, well, but my mic is on.
Okay.
Stay right there.
You still have your mics?
I still have my mic.
You're hooked in.
Okay,
As long as it's on.
it is on. When hungry mouths have enough food, when tired souls have been renewed, when kindness like a river flows, imagine that and make it so.
When kindness like
A river flows, imagine that, then make it so. When fearful friends are no longer scared, when broken hearts are repaired, when we all practice the good we know, imagine that and make it so.
when we all
Practice the good we know, imagine that and make it so.
When faith in others is restored, when nature's wonder is not ignored, when we've learned lessons from long ago, imagine that, then make it so.
When we've learned lessons from long ago, imagine that and make it so.
when the weak are finally strong, when every person knows right from wrong, when our hard work begins to show, imagine that, then make it so. When our
Our fire begins to show, imagine that and make it so.
when beliefs do
Not
not
divide,
divide, when
we're
we're
sharing side by side.
when seeds we've sown begin to grow, imagine that
And make it so.
when seeds we've sown begin to grow,
Imagine that and make it so.
Let's all do that last verse together, even up there in the gallery.
Yep.
When
Believe
beliefs
true and not divide, and we're sharing side by side.
when seeds
We've
we've sown
grown, begin to grow. Imagine that and make it so. What we always sow begin to grow. Imagine that and make it so. that, Dan? Dan, is that song on your web page?
Pardon me?
Imagine that, is that on your web page?
Yes, there's this magic thing called Bandcamp. And if you go to the website Bandcamp and type in Dan Berggren, you can find, you can listen to or download MP3s of music. I do have CDs, but it seems like nobody's got CD players anymore, so whatever, good. However you listen, I hope you'll make music too.
Thank you so much, Dan, and all of you for coming today. We certainly enjoyed this performance, and I hope it's triggered your interest in storytelling and in making music, as Dan says. So again, on behalf of Shenandoah Neighbors Connecting, thank you for being here. Just to let you know that if you are a member, our next event will be coming up on March 14th. We're going to be doing an outing to a maple farm, where we're going to be learning about how maple syrup is made. So that should be interesting. And then in April, on the 27th, at St. Mary's of Crescent is the church. We're having someone come to talk about safety at home, how we can modify our homes to make sure that they're suited for us as we age. And finally, another major event coming up in this area on May 18th is a senior forum that's going to be held at St. Edward's Church. It's an all-day forum. We'll be discussing the needs of seniors, not only today, but what we can anticipate the needs to be in our communities for the future. And that's something that's being spearheaded by Captain, and we're certainly a part of that for Shenandoah Neighbors. So again, if you have any questions about us, Loretta's in the back, and I'll be there in a moment to answer any questions you might have, and maybe you'll think about joining us if you haven't already. There should be, I think, some more refreshments in the back, so help yourselves and enjoy the rest of your Valentine's Day. Thank you for coming. Let's try to do it again.